Hello and welcome back to Too Far Tech. It's been a while since we did a proper video that has some information for you that is useful. But this is not exactly going to be useful for you. I'm going to say upfront in this video that don't try this at home. We don't want you to try this and have face any kind of issues and come back to us and say that we saw your YouTube and we did that and now we have a problem. We do this in almost all of our builds because most of our builds we use used components, and you know that already. We do new builds too, but in the new builds it's kind of slightly different process or procedure, but most of this process do come in the new build as well. So what are we talking about? What we are talking about, these components right here. What are these components? Okay, this is a fourth gen processor, and this is a cheap thermal compound. This is the thermal compound that we use mostly on simple builds. Obviously, tissue, alcohol, and then we have a screwdriver. We have a cloth, piece of cotton and polyester. This is a sandpaper, 220 grit, a cheap Intel cooling solution, a motherboard, and a box full of of brushes, toothbrush, paintbrush, whatever brush you can find it. I mean, it's over here. And then we have the thermal gun to find the temperature. And then we have a proper heat gun. Okay, this is a proper gun. This is not a hair dryer. So what I'm going to show here, I'm going to show our technique of installing the right way, or our way, the Too Far Tech way of installing the heatsink onto a processor. I mean, it's pretty straightforward for most of the people. Take the heatsink, wipe it clean, install it onto the motherboard, and then put some thermal compound, and then just put the cooler. For us, it's a slightly more elaborate process, and that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to give the reason why we're going to do this. See, this is a used processor. It comes from somebody or someone or somewhere of another PC, and it had a thermal compound on this before. Now manufacturers use different kind of thermal compounds all the time. Now I don't know what was used there. It doesn't matter what was used there. When I receive a processor, the first thing I do is I wipe it clean using a clean cloth or a tissue, and then I use some alcohol to actually make sure it's completely clean, and I make sure the back side also is cleaned. Now if you look close on this processor, you can see there is SMD, surface mount chips or devices or electronic components on this one. So you cannot just take a tissue, go about just scrubbing the back, because you're going to damage those, or those going to get chipped off. Then you have a dead processor, and that's bad news. But still, these pins have been there for I don't know how long. So I don't know how long it was outside. So there is oxidization happening in both sides, over here and here. Though these are supposed to be gold plated or whatever, I'm going to do is I'm going to clean them and I'm going to store them for future use. Now when the future use comes, for example an installation like this, or when you buy a CPU combination, or when you buy the whole PC from us, I take the processor, I have a look, I inspect it, I test it. Obviously, I put it on the motherboard, I put the cooler on, I put the cheap thermal compound, I just turn it on to see if it is working, it stays on the BIOS. And then if it does, the next process is I go with the thorough cleaning. So thorough cleaning including the tissue, I wipe it clean, I make sure it looks like new, I make sure there is no residue from the previous thermal compound. I'm not sure if the camera can pick up, as you can see on this one, there could be still a little bit residue of thermal compound. Now, does that really matter? In a way it does, because when I put the new compound, there could be chemicals that could mix and cause problems or erosion or any kind of other issues that is unexpected. So it's better to remove all the things from this one. So like I said, first step is to clean with this and the alcohol so it looks fresh. Now what is the next step that I do that I don't recommend? The next step that I do is actually I sand this one. This is called lapping, and is a technical term. People just put the sandpaper flat and they just keep scrubbing the whole thing. till it looks like a really smooth. They just rub off all the markings from the processor. I'm not going to do that, because the benefit from doing that is very less, and it's a very time consuming process, and I could make a mistake. So then what am I talking about? See, the processor, whether I clean it or not, this is nickel plated. There is a thin layer of oxidization happening on top of that, and that layer becomes a protective layer that prevents the thermal conductivity. So what I would do is I would just sand it so lightly that I break through the barrier, and I see some scratches on the top, so I know actually I've broken the oxidization barrier to reach to the nickel metal. And then I go ahead with the installation, and even the installation is slightly different, which I would actually show to you. Now see, this is the compound thing here. Before that, there is a reason why this motherboard is existing on this table right now, because I don't need it to be here. Before you sand this metal, make sure you do not have any circuit boards or anything nearby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to place this inside the box, because I don't want these metal filings to actually fall on top of the board. The board has micro circuit, has surface mount components, resistors, capacitors. Those get shorted, you have a new problem that you just started. So what I would do is I would assume right now that it is clean. I'm just going to take a piece of tissue. I'm just going to wipe it clean, just for the sake of showing you guys really quick. And you can see right now it looks clear, but I can still see some mark, maybe it's not clear on the camera, of the previous heatsink mounting. So what I would do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do light sanding on this one. I'll do it on top of this because I can wipe it off. Many people would actually place it upside down and rub the processor on the sandpaper. I would like to have a feeling of what's happening, because I've done this like 1,000 times, and sanding is nothing new for me. So I would like to feel, I don't want to exert too much force, I don't want to do too much rubbing, because then we have an uneven surface, and then when we mount the cooler, it's not proper. And I don't want to sand off too much, so that there becomes a huge gap in between the cooler and the processor, which will get filled up by the thermal compound, and then it does not improve the thermal conductivity. Too much thermal compound does not improve. We need the metal and metal to touch, and then whatever space is in between the metal, we want the compound to fill. That's how the real thing works. So I will continue sanding it in a way that I can feel some areas are getting sanded off more, and I'm pretty sure the IHS top is not flat, and it's evident because some areas are getting scratched better than the other, and maybe the camera is seeing the scratches. Can you see the scratches? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to continue in the opposite direction here. So it's pretty simple actually. So this is the way I feel the sanding. It's not just, I just go blindly and scrub. I'm just feeling how it is. That's why I cannot tell you or express how it feels. It comes from an experience of doing this 1,000 times. And if you ask me, what is the benefit? The benefit is drop in temperature and increase in performance. I'm not talking about overclocking. I'm talking about standard boost the performance of the Intel processor. I've seen it a lot of times on OEM systems that the standard boost goes slightly higher and the temperatures drops by a few degrees. That helps me to make sure that it gets a longer life and a slightly better performance. Why not? So if looking closely, I can already see there is metal filings, which the camera probably cannot pick up, and even on my finger I can feel the metal filings. So there is metal filings all over the place from this one, and the scratches are evident now. So another thing what I'm going to do is that's where this cloth comes in. You might think, what can a cloth do sandpaper can't? This is more like a smoothing cloth for me, and I'm going to go ahead and rub on this one, and it smoothens out any kind of imperfection, and this cloth is really actually strong and capable of doing that. So when I rub my finger on top, I can feel if there is any imperfection, because then it wouldn't be as smooth as this. I would feel like it's getting stuck. So right now it looks pretty clean. I'm not going to do the whole process. Let me put the processor here, and before I put the processor, I want to show you something. So now I have sanded it, and there is dust all over this one. That's where I'm going to use my brushes. I'm going to use these brushes. I'm going to take a hard bristle one, and then I'm going to clean this one. So the immediate big particles actually, the bigger particles actually go out or is removed. I'm going to go in the back side also. People are really concerned about the static electricity. Yeah, in some areas static electricity is really a big problem. Fortunately for us, it isn't. And this is another fine touch brush that I use that goes into smaller areas, so I can clean these specific areas, and also in this small areas that requires to be cleaned. So this is just a demo that I'm showing, so I'm just going to keep this processor here. It's not just a one-side job, it's a two-side job. Now comes this one. As you look at this, this is a copper finished Intel. They don't make this anymore right now. They just come in plain aluminum. Whether it's aluminum or copper, there will be oxidization, and that's why the aluminum looks white in color right now, because it's totally oxidized. And this copper also, you can see the marks on that. I can use slightly more pressure on this one because I know how and why it's been done. It's not a processor, so I don't have to worry about it much. I'm right now doing it in one side only, so that I know what's going to happen or what's happening, and now I do the opposite side. I hope you guys can see what I'm doing here. And even by listening to the sound of the sandpaper, I would know what's really happening in there. So right now, the dark surface become a shiny surface, and I'm going to use this to do the finishing job. And you would see right now it's a clean cloth almost. It's just a slight blemish from the nickel on the processor. So I have done some polishing with the cloth, not with the polishing paper. You can see how it looks like. So you can see it's kind of fully scratched, and it's kind of goldish in appearance. And you can see what happened to the cloth. This is copper coming out of the thing by the action of sanding. So it has become more and more. See, before it was kind of getting grabbed, now it's become very smooth. So that's pretty much I want to show. And also I want to show, this is this is the one I talked about. These days Intel doesn't waste money putting copper in there. It's just one. It's just been scratched. You can see the aluminum looks fresh. It scratches. I'm going to take this cloth and I'm going to sand it down using a cloth alone, and then you're going to see what really happens, how much of the metal comes off. It's kind of a little bit taxing process, and I really feel this one. I'm not just rubbing somewhere, I just feel and apply pressure only in the area that is required. And now it's become more smoother. And look at this. So this is the aluminum, and this is the amount of aluminum coming out of this one. So that I want to show you this to you guys, that this is something we know and we've been doing every day when we do each of our builds, especially on aluminum heatsink, and you can really find the difference. And I'm not going to sand it down too much because I don't want this to go down in even 1 millimeter. That's too much, because then the amount of pressure the heatsink applies onto the processor reduces, and that causes further problems. So whatever gain we have by this is lost, because then we have a gap in between the processor and the IHS and the heatsink, and that gets filled up by the thermal compound, which is not the best way to deal with it. The best way to deal with this is when I put the thermal compound on the IHS and press this, it should squeeze out slightly through the side of the processor or this area, so this literally touches the IHS. So now actually in the reality I'm not going to place this right now onto a motherboard. The reason being that still this has some metal filing on top of this one, so I'm not going to use this one. I'm just took this for an example. I'm going to actually use this one as an example because this one was filed a while back and this does not have any more filing. It's actually clean. That one or the actual one, after doing this we would actually probably blow it and wash it to make sure no aluminum filings are left on this one, and then we would again go with this cloth to clean it before we actually place it. So I'm just going to keep it here for now, and I'm just going to show to you that I have the processor that I already cleaned. I'm going to place it onto the motherboard and show you how we continue with the installation. So here is the board coming out now. I'm just going to use this as the base. Actually, I'm going to place this upside down because there is dust on this till now, and this has been under. So here we are, and for the time being I'm just going to keep this. When you're around the motherboard and the processor installation, you better have to be patient because these pins are really delicate. Don't be fooled, they can break and it can cause, you can lose your motherboard. So I'm going to open this here, real simple and real easy. I'm going to take this cover out. It's better to always keep the board covered and never lose this cover. It's out now, and I'm going to take this processor. Try not to touch the back side once you have cleaned because it's clean, or if you are in doubt, if you touch it by your hand, if there is oily residue, please go ahead and clean it once more. Something that I did not show, all I showed it to you guys was using this cloth on the processor, cleaning it. Once again I'm going to go ahead and show that. I'm going to clean this using this cloth here in this way, and I don't want to show this in the video because I don't want anybody trying to imitate us, because if I by mistake hit the side and this cloth pulls out one of these chips, then we have a very bad problem. So I don't want to show this, but this is also something we do in some chips that we receive due to it being exposed into the air for a long time. So some of the processors being in the open air for a long time and previously being not kept in the proper way might have some oxidization over here, and that also need to come out, might not come out of this, and that's where we again use a sandpaper to actually sand it down lightly, very lightly. We don't want to scratch these ones, and it's a very bad idea. Most of the people online is going to get crazy saying that I'm crazy when I do that, but I've been doing this for a very long time and I have had no problems. I'm talking about 10 plus years doing something like this. So I go do with light sanding and I make sure this is clean, but right now I won't do this because this one looks pretty good to me. So let's get back to business, and let me show you. I'm going to put this right here. It's better I will place it in the horizontal way. Okay, now I place the processor, it's not moving. Now I've already touched it many times, so I'm going to close this off. So there it is, it's closed, and I would actually use an alcohol wipe to wipe it. And now that we are sure it's clean, the next step is I'm going to take a temperature check. It's almost 28-29 degrees on top of the processor. It's actually showing 30 degrees, 29. And I'm going to check this capacitor here. It's around 28 degrees as well, because the room is really hot. The frame, this is actually around 30 degrees. Now what's the next step? So now I know the temperature. So what's going to happen here really? What's going to happen here is I'm going to preheat the processor and then apply thermal compound, and then I'm going to preheat the heatsink, and then I'm going to just apply heat one more time to bring the process to a certain temperature, and then I'm going to install the heatsink. It's a quick process because I don't want either of them to lose the temperature. I want to preheat because I want to make sure the thermal compound is in the most liquid state as much as possible, so that we get a good squeeze of the thermal compound. So let me show that to you right now. So I know this temperature is 28. I would take it somewhere around to 35, I mean 35 plus 40, 45 degrees before I decide to stop. And this is a fast heater, so I cannot hold it for long and I have to hold it in a real distance. If you want to do this, you can actually use a hair dryer, but you got to hold it for a longer time, and I don't like to hold heat for a long time. It has to be quick. These caps can handle up to 100 degrees, I believe, but we are not going to go anywhere near that. So let's get started. I'm just going to turn it on right now just to feel it. Okay, it's getting hot. So the preheating of the first step is done. We have around 33 to, we're going to continue heating, I'm sorry. So we have around 38 degrees right now. It's good enough for the first step, preheating. Now what I would do is I'm going to take this thermal compound. I'm going to use my original compound. I'm going to waste some of it because for me this is really precious. It's been really good throughout all my builds, and I use this on the graphics card. I use this screwdriver because it's been my it's my best friend ever since I started doing this as 2FAR Tech. I'm going to take a big blob, a really big blob. Got to be really careful, cannot drop it anywhere else. I'm going to paste it over here. Now comes the, I'm just going to leave it there so that the compound absorbs the heat from the IHS. I'm going to heat this guy. Before I'm going to heat this guy, I'm going to just check how hot it is. And it's around 29 degrees because the room is really hot. I'm going to do this on my hand because I'm going to have a feel of how, I don't want to melt the plastics. Okay, I feel my hand is getting hot. Just want to raise the temperature a bit. Now it's reached around 37 degrees. This is my body temperature. I'm going to keep it here. Now I'm going to one last time apply thermal heat on this one. You have reached 50 plus on top of the compound, and now it's dropping. The rest of the components are still around 40-45 degrees. It's safe to touch, so it's not that hot. Now here comes the trick. So I'm just going to place this one here. So and now that we have the thermal compound, I'm going to press this. Okay, it's all seated. Now I'll do the one side, the other side, this side, and the last side. That's it. So we have this one. What I would do next is, actually I have a light. It's not here right now, but I use the light to actually visually inspect how much of a squeeze is there. I can see here right now there's a squeeze in this side, and yes, there is squeeze in the other side. Yep, there is squeeze in here. I cannot see here much, but I believe there should be squeeze. What I mean by squeeze is the thermal compound has been squeezed through the side a little bit, so I know that it's been pressed and it's coming out to the side, and the surface area has full coverage without any area being missed out. So that's pretty much. I thought it could be a very short video. Now the reason I'm showing is when I do a build, I go through this process. You can see how long it's taken by just in a quick way to show it to you how we do this. Now next you would see something else. You guys know how I do builds. Now the next thing that you would see is we are also going to do a CPU and motherboard and RAM combination. What does that mean? I'm going to provide CPU, motherboard, RAM combination starting from 300 or all the way up to more than 1,000 dirhams. So even in those combinations, if you buy it with the cooler, I'm going to do the same installation for you free of cost and send it to you. But by default, the combination does not come with the cooler. But if you buy the cooler, this is how we do the installation, and we use the best thermal compound that I have here for this process. So I hope all you understand. I hope you all understand the way we do things here. We do it the right way or the best scientific way possible so that you can have the best benefit. And that's pretty much. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and do wait for the next video where we show the motherboard combinations. After that, we show how we clean an RX 580, and after that we show our new combination builds and the complete builds, the T600, the T700, T800, all the way to T5000. All those builds are coming up. Do subscribe and enjoy. Thank you.